Hello, good crowd. I know almost everyone wants one thing in this life, a little more money. And for entrepreneurs, it can be the lifeblood of their organization. Today, we have with us Kimmy Paluch, who is a venture capitalist who funds startup companies, especially for underserved communities. You don't want to miss this episode. If you are an entrepreneur, you know an entrepreneur, you can't miss it. Stick around.
Welcome to the Your Mark on the World show with your champion of social good, Devin D. Thorpe.
Our sponsor, Johnson & Johnson, matches most individual donations up to $250 at caringcrowd.org. Kimmy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Devin. Thanks for having me.
We're thrilled to have you. And I probably didn't even say your name properly because you are, and I didn't properly introduce you. I got so excited. I just overwhelmed myself with excitement. But you are Kimmy Paluch, and you are the executive director, the managing director of Betaboom, which is the name of your seed stage venture fund, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Now, I am just thrilled to have you on the show, and we're excited to talk to you. Tell us a little about Betaboom and who you fund.
Sure. So we are primarily focused in the U.S. at the moment, and specifically in regions that are typically have been overlooked by venture capital. So we invest kind of between the coasts. Our primary emphasis is Intermountain area. I'm here in Salt Lake City today, and the Midwest, where we have the Chicago location, and the South. But we really look across the states. We primarily look for also founders who have been also overlooked by venture capital. So underrepresented founders in many aspects because of gender, background, race. We consider ourselves a fund that levels the playing field, and it's not just for a moral issue, it's also an economic one. There's massive opportunities, both from a social perspective and an economic perspective, and that's why our firm exists.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, there really are issues here, and it's so difficult sometimes even for us to talk about them because they're so fraught. But I'm so glad that you'd come on the show and talk to us a little bit about it. Let's start first. Why don't you give us an example or two? I think you've got 6 portfolio companies already. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about one or two of them and give us a sense about what the companies are doing and who the founders are.
Sure. Yeah. And we like to talk about the founders a lot because, obviously we love what they're building, but we're also driven by what the founders are bringing to the table, which is often a unique perspective and a lot of experience in an area that maybe is overlooked. So I'll speak about Fiveable first. Fiveable is an online social platform, social learning platform, and it was founded by a woman named Amanda Doa-Moral, who was a Teach for America teacher, and she taught in the Oakland high schools for 5 years, specifically for AP learning. And for those that know, and teachers will know this, AP is a massive opportunity for students, especially for when you're entering college. It has tuition impacts. So if you bring those credits in, you are then ostensibly lowering your tuition. So she had left the classroom and moved to Portland, Maine, and decided that, she still wanted to keep teaching. And so organically, her company came about just because she wanted to reach more students and continue to allow for other people to have that opportunity to be able to get quality education and pass those exams. So she created an online learning platform around it. It's growing massively. Just this last year, for their last pass rates, it was between 90 and 92%, where the national average is around 55%. So it has massive implications in terms of potential for impact in education. And she's now located in Madison, Wisconsin. So it's a great story. She's definitely had a long journey, not just geographically, but also through her story.
Fantastic. Now, any other examples you want to share?
Yes. So another group that we've funded was, it's also founded by a female founder, and she was coming with an economics background. She's in the Chicago area. The company is called Wish Your Price. And what she's building is an AI tool that allows retailers to basically do dynamic pricing on the spot. So people can come to their websites and indicate, I want to pay this for an item, and their tool on the back end determines whether or not that price meets the threshold and whether they can purchase the items. This is a $1 trillion problem. It has a massive opportunity for growth and providing jobs, and also then it's taking advantage of something in economics, which is called the willingness to pay curve, which has typically been avoided with the flat discounting and ability to pay. I'll talk about a third one, which also is a social enterprise, and that's an allergy management tool. It's called Callian. And that was founded by actually a group of parents who had sufferings for food allergies, life-threatening in their families. And they wanted to find a tool themselves that just didn't exist. They wanted to be able to not only track incidents, but plan their meals and find safe options for themselves. So they created that tool and also are building something that I think has extreme implications, both from a social aspect and economic.
Wow, that is exciting stuff. Kimmy, your approach is to fund entrepreneurs who are overlooked and underserved. I imagine some of them, euphemistically, we might say, look like you, women of color. You are extraordinarily well educated. Dartmouth undergrad, MIT master's degree. You are a venture capitalist. You are part of America's power elite. But sitting in your chair, do you ever feel like you are dismissed because of the way you look, despite the fact that you are rich, powerful, and super well educated?
So I'll say I'm of two minds in this. I will say that the early part of my career, I was quite naive and oblivious to any of that. I kept going forward and said that things that I achieved, it's because of the work that I put in. And any time that I was rejected, I would say it's because I was not qualified. I think retrospectively, I've definitely discerned there were moments where there was potentially bias. And I think it was my awakening in that has led me to this kind of dream of mine to level the playing field and pay it forward, because I have been extraordinarily lucky to have the experiences and the opportunities that I have had so far. So whereas I say I'm very cognizant of it, I also don't let it hold me back, and I don't let those things be the reason that I say, well, I should give up or this is impossible. If I see those, it's really opportunities for improvement. And most of the things I'm seeing in venture capital and in my own experiences, it's usually implicit bias. People are just not aware that that's happening. They're not aware that they might be approaching somebody with a more of a negative approach or asking more negative questions versus, how they may approach somebody who looks more like them or fits more of a mold that has typically gotten the opportunity. So I certainly feel that there have been moments where that's happened, and I'm more aware of how it happens to other people, and that's kind of what drives me to keep moving forward. I think anybody who looks like me, even if they've reached upper echelon of power or position, is aware of that, and I think it's an onus on us to make others aware who are in our positions, who may not look like us, and then also just to work for those that don't have the voice, because they often are not heard.
It is, I think, a challenging thing for a lot of us, including people like me who struggle, right, to evaluate. I even, struggle with this personally, right, to know when I am behaving in a way that is guided by those implicit biases that I don't even recognize, and when I am guided by stupidity, or just when I'm guided by some other form of judgment that might even be valid. And it's really tough for me to know. And so I imagine it's equally or greater, more frustrating on your side of that coin, where you are more likely to be I think, more likely to be a negative recipient of that kind of implicit bias or explicit bias. But
I think as a society, we should all be equally frustrated. And I think in some ways it's great where we are now, because there has been somewhat of an awakening and an awareness of this, and an awareness that also maybe you are well-intentioned and we all expect ourselves to hold high standards for ourselves, but just to be aware that sometimes there are things that cause you to think a certain way that may change your behavior, even though your intentions remain the same. So I think it's more just being conscious of it. And I talk a lot about bringing allies to the table. You know, I think that those who are being overlooked and those who might be facing these biases can't fight this battle alone. And what we need to do is enable and empower the voices of allies, that we can kind of do this together. And no changes in society have happened just alone. Usually you need allies to help push that forward, particularly if they hold the power. So I hear your point. I think we should all feel it and be equally, inspired to join this movement.
About 5 years ago, someone introduced me to a really old tool that I think was published by a little school in across the river from MIT, where you went. But Harvard created this little tool, and it's kind of arcane, but it's still online. At least last I checked. I think they call it their implicit bias tester thing, something like that. And you can go, and it was amazing, right? Because you can go on and test yourself about your implicit biases around race and gender, and it's scary for all of us. And I've even talked to women who admit that they have done this test on the gender bias test, for instance, and they have discovered that they have their own implicit bias against women because the culture guides us in that direction so much. So it suggests to me that what you're doing is really, really important. How have you pulled it off? What's the key to your success so far?
So I think I've been pulling a lot in terms of, so my first part of my career was in product innovation and user experience. So looking at needs and understanding people and understanding like where pressure points are. And I think I brought that into this space. I think there are a couple of things that are holding us back in terms of seeing progress here. One is there are many people that will give lip service and say that they want to change things, they want to invest in more women, and they want to invest in more minorities, etc., but they don't change their behaviors, and they're not looking to change. Like for venture capitalists, there's several areas where you can look for improvements. How are you sourcing your deals? How are you getting to find new founders? Are you only using your existing network, and how diverse is that network? And then the second piece is in the analysis and actually figuring out, do you invest in them? What kind of questions are you asking? How are you posing those questions? Who else is evaluating them? Those are all areas where bias can come into play and I think needs to be examined. And then the third piece, which I think people talk about a lot less, is then how are you supporting your founders post-investment? And I think to date, what we've been doing is basically applying the same system to all founders and not realizing that there may be unique needs and unique things you need to do. So I'll give a specific example. In our 6 investments that we made last year, most of the work has happened actually, certainly within the time frame when we were working with them. There was about a 3-month program where we actually helped them grow. But a lot of the work came after, because it's not just what we do with them, but then they face bias all along the way, from seed investors to then getting partners. So we are really approaching this as an ecosystem building that we need to do. We need to surround our founders with connections and advocates. Like I have had to specifically speak on behalf of my founders, because I recognize that just because they got that initial investment and that help in the beginning, they will continue to face bias all along the way. So I think there's, in general, venture capital needs to reevaluate from beginning to all the way post-investment. How are we changing our behaviors to better support that more diverse founders?
When I got started in the venture community 25 years ago, working as an investment banker, one of the things that I picked up very quickly was that venture capitalists used a very specific and clear approach to screening deals initially. And it was quite simply this: did the deal come from a trusted introduction, a trusted source? And if not, it was sort of over the transom, as it would be described, it was put in a separate pile.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's the sort of systemic problem that you highlight, because that meant that the venture capitalist, who's generally a white middle-aged man,
Mm-hmm.
is relying on his network of other white middle-aged men to bring him deals.
Correct.
And so an African-American woman is much less likely to have a direct quality connection and introduction to a white middle-aged rich man that's a venture capitalist. And so it was a problem. So my question is, what do you do to flip that script to make capital accessible to the women and minorities you hope to serve?
Yeah, and I'm really grateful that you brought that up. I think the warm intro and saying that a founder is no good unless they get a warm intro is one of the things that is incenses me the most, and the one that I'm trying to break down the most, because I think that one is definitely reinforcing the biases that we see. And we're also seeing venture capitalists bring in one woman into their fold and say, well, we've now fixed our pipeline issue, but have you actually looked at everything else? Are they reinforcing what was already in the culture? Are they bringing unique perspectives and backgrounds? Or are they all coming from the same school, etc.? So I think there's a lot to be done in just the sourcing aspect. And from our perspective, how we've done that, I do think there is something about having a leader or a managing partner that is a woman or an underrepresented person. I do think by nature of that, you do attract others, but it's not to say that we don't still need to do work. And we do a lot of work on that sense. So part of it is just getting out there into the communities and finding partners who are already supporting those groups. So here in Utah, for instance, I'm very heavily involved with a lot of the great women groups that already exist and that are supporting female founders, like Womenpreneurs and Brave. And we do the same across the state. So we're finding, foundations and nonprofits and people who work in the government who are already supporting these groups and reaching out to them and saying, like, we're here and we really want to work with these founders. We're not just saying it and actually going to those events and trying to meet those communities. I think that does the biggest thing for us. And then having just individuals on the ground who are in those startup ecosystems to say, consider us a resource and consider sending your founders our way. I think that goes a long way. And yes, it takes work, but you will see the outcomes completely change in terms of what you're seeing come across your table, and don't separate them in different piles.
Kimmy, what is the thing you're most proud of having accomplished so far?
There's so much yet still that I want to accomplish. So this is sometimes a tough question for me. I think in a lot of ways, how we started was to throw caution to the wind. So I think just being in this space right now and running this company is probably my greatest achievement. I could have sat back for a long time and said, there's a problem, I'm eventually going to fix it. But I decided to leave the Bay Area. I decided to, do the fund with my husband together, and we made that decision. And so I think that is my proudest achievement. And I'm seeing some of that come back to me, even from not just the founders that we've worked with, but I talk to founders every day and I'm hearing their stories and finding new ways to help them. I think it's important that if there's something that you want to fix, and this goes across all social entrepreneurship, find the way to do it. Don't wait for tomorrow.
Excellent. Kimmy, you have done some really remarkable things. Again, I want to emphasize your extraordinary education and what a tiny percentage of people in this world kind of have that double Ivy pedigree that you have. I guess MIT is not technically an Ivy League school, but you get what I mean. You're extraordinarily well educated, and there are a few thousand venture capitalists in the entire country. And you are now one of them. You really are in this sort of unique place of power and influence. What's the most important lesson you've learned along the way?
This may sound trite, and maybe many people will say this, but of all the things I've done, my heart is most into this. And I think it's to find the thing that motivates you most and go for that, because all of those accolades don't mean anything. The legacy that you leave is what you do with it. And I will say, you know, I'm proud of all of my achievements, but I hold a much high bar for what comes next. What do I do with that? Do I use it for my own gratification and my own self-interest, or do I pay it forward? And I think that is the biggest lesson here, is that when your goals are much bigger than yourself, you will have a lot more to be proud of.
Yeah, brilliant. Kimmy, you talked a little bit about the challenge it was to launch Betta Boom and how proud you are of having done that. I want you to think for a minute about why you were willing to try that, why you felt compelled to do that. Because I think there are a lot of people in a similar situation that spend their days thinking someone ought to do that, or maybe someday I'll do that, and you did it. Mm-hmm. Why?
Very good question, Devin. I think probably multiple factors. Maybe age has something to do with it. I'm getting older and I'm thinking I want to leave my legacy.
Yeah, because that's the first thing people think when they see you is that you're old. But yes, go ahead.
No, but you know, it was interesting because I've lived several places. I came from Jamaica originally, and that was where I was born. And, you know, leaving there, sometimes you carry guilt because you think, you know, brain drain that happens with those countries. And I've always said, one day I'm going to do something about that. And I think I kept creating more one days. And like I said, I had a kind of an enlightening moment, just being in so many male-dominated fields where I realized, like, I was facing these biases and was just ignorant to them. And there needs to be someone to do it. So I've always told other people, if it needs to be someone, why not you? And so that's what we decided to do.
Kimmy, what is your superpower?
So I think my superpower is, I guess maybe being a little bit reckless. Like I said, I think that, you know, it's with all entrepreneurship. Sometimes you need to take leaps of faith. And I'm often one to be compulsive and take a leap of faith. And I encourage others to take leaps of faith on themselves.
Oh, that's great. That's a great superpower. And I see the power of that superpower. Kimmy, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I know you are busy and really am grateful for it. But before you go, would you take just a minute and tell people how they can learn more about Betta Boom? Especially take a minute and tell people specifically what's the first step if they want to pitch you a deal. And then be sure to tell people how they can connect with you personally.
Great. Yes. So go to betaboom.com. If you want to learn more, that's the best place to kind of read about the things that we're doing. I'm very active on Twitter. It's at Kimmy Paluch. So definitely follow me and then send me a direct message. You know, I do get busy, so I may not always reply, but usually if you write again, I will do my best to reach you. So please do that. And then, yes, just follow where we go. I do speak a lot, and I am, as I mentioned, trying to reach more founders and talk to more partners and communities. So certainly track me down that way as well.
Fantastic. Well, again, Kimmy, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We wish you every success in funding more entrepreneurs who have been traditionally underserved.
Thank you.
All righty, let's do some good.
At Caring Crowd, we believe everyone has the power to make a difference. Through our crowdfunding platform for community health, we empower passionate people to drive real change. Whether you work for a nonprofit organization, volunteer, or want to get involved for the first time, you can post a campaign on Caring Crowd. Join us, because caring is where change begins.
Thanks for tuning in to the Your Mark on the World show, the Social Impact Podcast. Please subscribe via YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or Spotify.